On this week's episode of This Must Be the Place, we are going to talk about where we see the spring market in the Minneapolis metro area
2025, yeah.
going. We're going to do a little Minnesota market in a minute, and then we have a very special interview with John O'Sullivan of 1 Minute Tours and his new show, The Hidden Middle, or just Hidden Middle. So join us for the last one of the year, right?
First one of 2025.
Is that okay? Yeah, it is 2024, but by the time you hear it,
it'll be 2025.
It'll be the future.
Yep.
All right.
This must be the place. Yeah, this must be the place. Ain't no time to waste. Ain't no time to waste. So whether you in Minneapolis or St. Paul, Bloomington to Maple Grove, from the east side to the west side, down south to way up north, let me hear you say, this must be the place. Yeah, this must be
It will be the play. Who to do?
Yeah. So I
Too
was thinking,
legit.
should we change the whole intro? Being like, have it be like a montage of us like walking around town and being like, it's just two realtors talking stuff, and have it be like I
gotta think about that one.
like a old school sitcom,
Yeah, like bosom buddies or something.
type of deal. You know,
Perfect strangers.
Yeah. And I was, tell me this isn't good. It's two Twin Cities realtors bringing you the people, places, and properties that make the Twin Cities special.
Dude, that's great.
Yeah, that's a good elevator
That's
pitch
really
right
good.
there, right?
It's really good.
Yeah, PPP loan.
Yep.
Yeah.
Hello.
Hello.
And welcome to This Must Be the Place, the only Twin Cities real estate and real estate adjacent podcast where one of the hosts recently watched Silence of the Lambs and spent the last 30 minutes wondering how he would market Buffalo Bill's house.
I don't.
You remember Silence of the Lambs?
No.
Beautiful mid-century rambler with a potential in the basement with a well.
Oh, that's the guy.
That's Buffalo Bill.
All right.
In an art room in the basement
He's the guy
where you
that
can
says,
wear.
hello, Clarice.
No. That's Hannibal Lecter, bro.
Who's Buffalo Bill?
Buffalo Bill's the one that.
It puts the lotion on.
Yes. And
But
he's
who
the
is
one that goes.
Wait, so that's his house
That's his house.
that he's stuck in?
He's not stuck in there.
Wait, so Hannibal Lecter is the guy who puts the lotion on.
You are being willfully obtuse right now.
I don't know what's happening.
Buffalo Bill's the one that goes, is she a great big fat person?
I don't.
To Jodie Foster when she's asking about. And
Where
then
is Hannibal Lecter in this whole thing? Is he in jail?
Yes, he's in jail, but spoiler alert, he eventually gets out.
I
and
get it. So
runs to
Buffalo
South
Bill
America.
is the
Buffalo
bad.
Bill's
He's the bad guy.
He's the scariest guy.
Okay.
He's the one that makes skin suits out of
Yeah,
women.
I thought that was Hannibal Lecter who did that. Hannibal Lecter just does that.
Yeah,
when
he's
he's
also
talking
a
about
serial
it.
killer. But we'll rewatch together. We'll share some popcorn. And we'll think about how to market Buffalo Bill's house.
Okay.
Because it's an huge unfinished basement
lots of
with a
potential.
well, lots of potential.
Do you have to disclose that well?
You have to disclose the well and the butterfly sanctuary that exists
Okay.
right inside the front
right.
door.
Do you have to disclose, was there a murder on the property?
You do have to disclose if there was a murder on the
But there
property.
wasn't a murder.
There was murders on the property.
Multiple murders.
Yeah.
You have to disclose multiple murders?
That's
or
how
can
he
that be
had
one
his
disclosure?
basement art studio. We're going to market it as an art studio, but that's where he made his skin suits.
Okay, an art studio.
It's an art studio. But the potential, endless potential for
All
this
right,
basement.
All right. Can we use an alternate disclosure form for that?
Yeah, we'll use an alternate
Okay.
disclosure form for,
All right.
for
As is?
it'll be an as-is sale, that's for sure. Oh, boy.
Okay.
All right. Let's
so
get into it.
This week, we're not going to do a neighborhood this week because we talked to John.
We talked to
O'Sullivan,
John for a long time.
which is a
great talk.
Great interview. Please stick around for that interview because it is a great interview. He has a really interesting backstory of how he got into the 1 Minute Tour thing, and I think he's
Yep.
going to provide a lot of great content and context for the Twin Cities and the Midwest in general with his new show. So excited to have him on to speak about that later. First, we're going to hop into what we think the 2025 spring market is.
It's right around the
gonna
corner,
look
my
like.
friend.
It is right around the
It's
corner.
right around the corner. So like the spring market really will start slowly heating up here in the next couple of months, which tend to go by really fast.
Yes,
So
yes.
what are you looking forward to? What do you think is going to happen with the spring market if historical trends are maintained? What are you hearing?
So, I mean, obviously, the thing on everybody's mind right now is interest rates, because really that has a lot to do with affordability, right? And if we see interest rates, so right now we'll get into it a little bit later, but right now they're hovering around 7-ish%.
It's not great.
Which is, still below their high, right? And there are buy down programs and other programs, but up from where we saw it at 6.18 was somewhere around the low. So, that does put a bit of a damper on the spring market, but as we've seen in the Twin Cities, we have such a robust market here, and such a good job market, and breadth of industry within the Twin Cities metro, from medical to retail to all sorts of different industries within the Twin Cities
Healthcare.
that make up. Yeah, that make
Did you
up.
say Medicare, medical?
Yeah, I was thinking medical devices, but different.
Yeah,
So medical
sure,
devices,
sure.
science. I mean, retail, from Target and
English,
Best Buy,
geography,
yeah,
Spanish,
yes,
Phi Ed.
yes, lots of education as well. Is what you were getting at.
Yep.
So I do think that we're going to see a strong spring market as usual. Inventory is a little higher than it has been in past years, which makes me hopeful that more inventory will come on the market in the spring. And as we know, there's a lot of pent-up buying power sort of waiting on the sidelines right now, for warmer weather, or for the hope that interest rates drop a little bit, or for the hope of that perfect house. And when the weather warms up and houses pop on the market, that creates more supply. But that's so quickly eaten up by demand in the Twin Cities metro that, you still see great houses going to multiple offers above listing. And it's been that way for the last, 12 years, something like that, with maybe a slight dip 1 or 2 of those years.
Yep.
But trending wise, it's been that way
Definitely
since the housing crash.
Yeah.
And
For sure since the
there's no
pandemic.
reason to think that should be any different. Now, I'm not saying that's the same for everywhere in the U.S., because it's not. Every market is local, as you've stated before. But I think it's going to be a really great spring market. And I'm looking forward to it, because I have a lot of buyers that are looking for houses right now, and there's just not enough on the market to satisfy what they are looking for. And I'm hopeful that we're going to get some good inventory coming on here. I think it's
also
going to be
hopeful.
competitive.
Yeah, the part of me that wishes that interest rates were down in the low 5s. This is just speaking from a realtor's mindset.
Yeah.
Not from a potential buyer or seller.
Not from a human.
Yeah,
perspective.
this is right. Robotic thinking is that if interest rates were suddenly to take a 2-point decrease,
God, prices, man.
it would be really rough for the spring, because if a house, say, the value was telling us as realtors that a seller should list it at $350, the buyers would, it would sell for $50,000 over asking in dozens of multiple offers.
If suddenly your purchasing power went up by, a 2-point a 2-point swing on a $350,000 house is what is it? I'm making this up right now, but is that around $50,000 of affordability in terms of the difference between a $300,000 and a $350,000 house?
Right. Because then your mortgage is going to go up based on the amount of money you have to pay over to get the house anyway, at which you could have gotten at $350 with a 7% interest rate. Anyway, they're still a little stubbornly high. Hopefully, as we get into spring market, we're going to see numbers more like 6.5, 6.75. That's my hope.
Yeah.
Because I think that's a modest decline that will incentivize some buyers to go out
Yeah.
that otherwise wouldn't if it was 7 or 7.5. And it'll incentivize some sellers that maybe want to, move up to a bigger house or something like that. But yeah, like we've said in a previous episode, if you look at just new listings alone over the last 3 years, I mean, it looks like a heart monitor, man. It's like, the new listings happen in April, May, and June, and they generally don't happen in December and January.
Nope.
So
Nope.
and that's where we are right now. So the inventory, like Casey said, is really low.
But if you're planning on listing in the spring, now's the time to be thinking of. Now's the time to be getting your ducks in a row. Now's the time to be
Couldn't be better said,
auditioning
yes.
realtors.
Yes.
It's the time to be cleaning
Yes.
things out. It's the time to be doing those projects that you want to
Little
get
by
done for
little.
the spring market, right?
Yeah,
It's the
yeah.
time to be thinking about the disclosure form. You know what I mean?
For
and taking
sure.
the time to fill that out because
Talk to your realtor about a seller's
Yep.
disclosure form
Yep.
because you're going to need to fill
Yep.
it out. It's the
Yep.
law.
Especially if you're in the situation, which I think a lot of us are as buyers and sellers, right? Like, I would say the majority of people cannot afford to buy another property without selling the property that they have, right?
Yeah.
And so if you are in that situation, you're going to need, you find a property that you love in this spring market, chances are you're not the only one that loves it, right? So you're going to need to be able to pull that trigger. And so if you're going on with a contingent offer, you're also going to have to be able to pull the trigger on selling your property and getting it on the market
At the drop of a hat.
ready to go, right?
Yep.
So the less paperwork there is to be done, the less wait time, the more you can just be like,
The more ready you are.
pull the trigger, ready to
essentially.
go. Yeah. So I think the spring market is going to be great. I do think that there is a valid concern among Twin Cities prospective buyers or homeowners or people looking to get into this market that they are priced out of the market, or we should wait until interest rates drop because that's when the affordability is going to be more in my favor. And I can tell you, if you look back historically, the best time to buy a house is always 5 years ago, right?
So they say. Yep, it's true.
And people who are watching this, my hand is kind of making like a sine wave pattern, right?
Yeah.
Troughs and tops and
Peaks and
bottoms,
valleys.
Peaks and valleys.
Heart rate monitor.
You may be purchasing at the upswing or the downswing of a peak, right? And prices may drop a little bit. But if you look at the history of American housing market, I mean, since we started taking numbers on this kind of stuff, it's gone up, right? So if your plan is to buy a house and live in that house for some time, there is a strong chance that you're going to come out ahead, whether buying down through equity or when interest rates drop, refinancing into that lower interest rate at the prices of 3 years ago. If it takes 3 years for interest rates to come down, you've locked in the prices from 3 years ago, not the prices of when those interest rates drops, and inevitably bring more buyers into the equation, which
Fully
is going to
agree.
push prices higher. And it's a tough situation because as we think here in the Twin Cities, prices are high, right? Mm-hmm. But for context, go to New York, go to LA, go
DC,
to Boston, go to DC,
Chicago,
go to Philadelphia.
anywhere in California.
Right? Yes. There are so many markets that are so much higher and so much less affordable that it would be naive to think that the Twin Cities won't follow suit because of what we bring in terms of quality of life from a culture and education perspective, but also a job market perspective, right? It's a desirable place to live. So, if you're on the fence, talk to a realtor. Feel free to hit us up. This must be the place pod at gmail.com or 612-234-1889. We're happy to just
Answer a question if you have it.
Exactly, right?
Whatever.
This is no harm, no foul kind of thing, right?
Yeah, no
There's-
pressure for anything, whatever.
Yep.
We're happy to answer questions as we are able. But yeah, overall, it's, as we've said before, if you're a first-time home buyer, you're not needing to sell to buy, your best time to buy is actually right now.
Yep. Yes. Right now.
Right now. However, if you are one of the, like Casey said, majority of people that probably are going to sell a house and buy a house at the same time, it doesn't really matter because you're going to take advantage of the market when you sell your house in the spring, but it's going to be harder to buy in the spring because, you know, there's more demand and prices are higher or whatever. If you are looking to just sell your house and not buy another house, then spring market is going to be your best time, you know, listing in April and May and June. But the spring market, you know, it's new listings wise, last spring market, we peaked in May at 7,051 new listings.
Which is down.
Yeah, it's
down
historically
from-
down. It was, you know, in the 8,000 and 9,000s almost a couple years ago at that same time point.
Yep.
Time point?
Yep.
I'm making that
It's,
up.
you know, a lot of people don't want to trade in their 3% mortgage, or they're older, they're, you know, part of the boomer generation, and they have a big, beautiful house and it's damn near paid off, or it is
Yep.
paid off, and they're like, why would I go to a small condo and pay the same? But there are going to be some great things coming on the market. I know that both of us have some great houses coming on the market.
We
that
do.
We're listing.
Yep. Just waiting for spring. And like I said, it really is going to be here before you know it. The snow that really has
Yet
not
to
much
fall.
of it has fallen and melted. We're going to get more of it, and then that will melt away. Spring market will start. Robins will be out. Green grass will be green. Trees will be leafy. Pictures will be taken.
And open
Homes
houses will be
sell.
plentiful.
The open houses will be plentiful.
Yeah.
So it should be a really robust spring. And
Robust. I like that word.
you used it earlier this same
Robust.
podcast.
Today?
Today.
Robust?
Today. You did.
Today, Junior?
Yes, you did. I don't remember what you were describing. Coffee, maybe.
I don't
freaking
drink coffee.
I don't know. You were describing something, but so yeah, it's early January now, and like Casey said, if you
I like how you did that, because it's actually late December,
it is.
but you said early January. Because
Well,
they're not-
Casey, it's been a long December.
the third wall, is that what they
and
call that?
there's reason to believe that this year
year?
will be better than the last.
Yeah, I agree, man.
Yep.
I wish I could remember the lyrics after that so I could continue this.
Yeah, me too. That would
But,
be a good bit, wouldn't
Here,
it?
do you say counting crows, or do you say counting crows? Counting crows.
I say
Counting crows or counting crows.
counting crows. I don't.
Yeah.
I should put
Counting.
I should say counting.
No, I think you say it the right way.
Counting crows.
Yeah. How do you say Pearl Jam?
Pearl Jam?
Yeah.
I say Pearl Jam.
Pearl Jam. Not Pearl Jam.
No.
Okay.
For those of you out there, don't ever Google what the name Pearl Jam actually means. It's upsetting. Well, what else do we have to talk about here, Casey?
Do you hear that?
Oh, I hear something.
That means it's time for the Minnesota Market in a Minute, a segment where we go over the current state of the Minnesota market in exactly 1 minute.
60 seconds.
60 seconds.
I'm getting my stopwatch app out.
Okay.
This is a stolen bit from a stand-up comedian. I texted you this bit and you never responded to me. Did you watch it?
No, I've seen it before. I saw it before.
Oh, you did?
Yeah,
Okay.
I knew the
Okay.
bit. Yeah.
It's a stand-up comedian bit where he points at somebody in the audience and says, start
Start counting backwards.
from 1 minute, and every time I point at you, say the number you're on, and it's just going to be a bit. And it is hilarious, and we have just stolen it right from under his feet, and we have incorporated it into a Twin Cities real estate and real estate adjacent podcast bit segment. All right, I'm ready when you are, sir.
All right. So, the Twin Cities market has an average of the percentage of the original price being sold for properties right now. Did that make sense at all?
Sure.
Okay. Is
45.
No, it is 98.6%.
That makes
Meaning
more
if you
sense.
list it, you are typically right now going to get 98.6% of your original listing price,
Not 46%.
not 46%, at an average of,
32.
nope, 32 times like 7, at an average of $196 per square foot. in
Got
the
it.
Twin
Not
Cities
$32 per square foot.
Not
That would be-
$32
that would be
per
bad.
square foot. How many shows, depending, does it take?
17.
Oh, no, that's closer. We're at 10, which is up from 9 the last month. So 10 showings to a pending sale at an average sale price of,
$7.
no, not $7, a lot more. $378,000 would be your average price. Nope, that's your
Median.
median price. And that has been Minnesota Market in a minute. That was a rough start to that one today.
That was all right. People like it.
Yeah, you know, I got a good zhuzh for that one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I liked it.
And on that note, join us for an interview with John O'Sullivan of 1 Minute Tours and his new venture, The Hidden Middle. We have a great interview with him coming up right now. Well, we'll jump right into it. Welcome. We'll do an intro earlier and cut it in, but this week we have special guest John O'Sullivan, 1 Minute Tours, and new venture television show, for lack of a better word in today's world, The Hidden Middle, which I'll let you explain what that is, but as I understand it, it is about telling the stories of the Midwest, Minnesota, but more broadly the Midwest, by Midwestern storytellers, like by us, by us, maybe for everyone, by us. So we're really excited to have you on today, and thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming in.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
I would love to know how you got started. I came across your work pretty late, I think, on Threads. 'Cause I was never I wasn't a TikTok user.
Yeah.
It was the one platform. I was like, I'm too old. I can't do it. And I wasn't a big Twitter guy. And I came across your stuff. I think it was like Burrito Mercado or something like that. And I was like, what is this? And it was amazing. I loved it. And then all of a sudden I started seeing you like segueing around town in St. Paul and bumped into you outside here when you were coming here to work on your TV show.
Yep.
So how did you get involved in the creator space and like where did the idea come from?
Right. So just seeing like for the last 3 years, I've started a social video channel, and it has grown to be the largest social video channel in Minnesota about Minnesota.
Yeah.
It started because I come from the travel industry. I was a tour director for years. I used to be on.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah,
I
makes
was,
sense.
I was on buses with a
does
microphone.
make sense.
I gave-
really?
Yeah, I gave tours of 26 countries in Europe, busloads of 50 people, 2-week trips to like Greece, Czech Republic, Spain,
amazing.
all over the place. It's an amazing job.
I would have never guessed. So I was asking Andrew earlier. I was like, does he have a journalistic background? Like that's an incredible background. It makes a lot of sense.
I went to St. John's University here in Minnesota.
Okay. You
did, okay.
Studied communication.
Okay.
I wanted to be a journalist or a video editor, one of the two.
Okay.
I graduated in the middle of the financial crisis,
Okay.
and I couldn't hold down a job.
Sure.
So 2008, the economy's falling down around us.
Sure, yeah.
My first job was at Fallon, a local ad agency here. It's
Okay.
quite
Yeah.
well respected and
Yeah.
well known. As a video editor, my second job was at the Star Tribune.
Okay.
And so I was kind of on the path that I wanted
Yeah.
to be
You
on.
were, yeah.
But lost both those jobs in a year.
Okay.
And so I decided to go overseas and wait for the economy to get better, I guess. 1 year turned into 12 years after
Wow.
I found the travel industry.
Yeah.
So I was based in London, but then I would hop all over continental Europe giving these tours, and that's where I got the training to do what I do today on video, but just in person. It's all about connection and
Sure.
helping people not necessarily understand the history of the Visigoths in Italy, but like, hey, if you go to this pizzeria in Rome called Dar Poeta, it's like better than any of the tourist crap you'll be to, and go talk to Luigi over there. He's the guy to go, like that
Yeah.
sort of thing is where I
Yeah,
learned.
yeah,
what to
yeah.
look next to.
Like a local navigator.
Yeah, that's what, like, people misunderstand what the role of being a tour guide is.
Sure.
They think it's about sharing facts and figures.
Yeah.
And while I can do that, it's more about connection.
Yeah.
Totally.
I eventually ended up in Australia because I married an Australian.
Okay.
Started my own tour company.
Okay.
Things were going pretty well with that. Became one of the larger walking tour businesses in Australia.
Okay.
It still runs there today. It's called Depot Adventures.
Okay.
life brought us to Minnesota with having I had a kid and wanted to have my kid, know my parents
Sure,
and all that. So
sure.
we came here and I said, let's just do it again.
So you're born and raised?
Yeah, I'm Mankato, so
okay.
just about an hour southwest of here.
Sure.
Yeah.
So, I was a prodigal son to Minnesota. I'd spent 12 years overseas giving tours of some of the most amazing places in the world.
Yeah.
That's so cool. That's such a cool origin story.
Well, and I've always thought that it'd be interesting to give tours in the place that had raised me. And there were there's a death by a thousand cuts thing moving to Minnesota, because it's not an insignificant thing to move a wife and a baby to another side of the world.
Yeah.
But there was the idea of giving tours. There's also our life change, having a baby, and my family was the first kid in our family of that generation. And also is when we were getting the ultrasound for our kid in Australia, I looked up the news and I saw the Australian news was playing this headline of Minneapolis burns as George Floyd riots.
Wow.
Sure.
And so I was reading this news from the place that I grew up in and feeling more disconnected than ever.
Sure.
And feeling there's this little lightning bolt that hit me of that would be such an interesting time.
Yeah.
I always wanted to come back and give tours here, but right now when the city's most at its in need, come back and reframe the story.
That's cool.
And so that was the inspiration for the early videos, was how do I just tell a different story? Because at that point when I came back in 2022, early 2022, the stuff had calcified, opinions had calcified about Minneapolis and what it meant.
Sure.
Every video I posted earlier would say Murderapolis or things like that.
That's what we find a lot of that on our TikToks. The ones that
the
go, which
comments.
you're just like, I've never lived there, that hellhole.
Yep.
And I'm
so
like, what are you?
I don't engage it, but directly.
Yes.
But I engage it by doing other videos about look how cool Minneapolis
Yeah,
is. So it's a
yeah.
counterpoint without ever being stated as
Yeah.
a counterpoint. And that's why I think it's taken off, is because people want to be proud of the place that they live, right?
They sure do, and that's why it's super important just for that reason, where you're reframing the narrative a little bit in your own way, where it's so cool in so many different ways, and it just, to many people, whether it be suburbanites here or people from all over the rest of the country, just showing how cool it is.
It is. It's also nice because, there are a lot of people that I think believe the stuff that they see or the negative side that they see, and they stop themselves from having these really cool experiences in the city. And that's so close, whether that's a 30-minute drive or something like that, for one reason or another. So to show them that it's there and it's available without having to dive into the negative side of it.
I've learned to be, with my time overseas, I learned to be sensitive to, I don't want to be that guy who comes back from his study abroad experience and is like, oh, you don't understand what life is like anywhere else. I never want to be that guy, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
there is a element to which people who have opinions about Minnesota who haven't traveled to other places, they don't appreciate how great this place is. We have a uniquely incredible city. From the cultural scene that we have here. We were talking before we started recording here about the music scene here, the theater scene, the dance scene, the history, the hardiness that comes from the cold weather, the architecture, both from the building we're in right now, and the old grain belt buildings, to the skyway systems in downtown. What we have here is, this is not hometown boosterism. I'm speaking from a place of I've traveled to a lot of places. I've seen a lot of cities. This city has something that's uniquely special. And we haven't quite figured out how to represent that and talk about it.
I agree. You're right. This place is really special and has a lot going on. And I feel like it's evolved quite a bit in the last 15 years. Probably since, how long were you gone? So 2008, 2009?
2009 to 2022.
You've probably noticed the evolution of the city itself from 2010 till now.
But I mean, the difference is that you go to Philadelphia and you're not going to have a hard time finding people talk about how great Philadelphia is.
For sure.
It's the worst part about Philadelphia. They just won't shut up about it.
It's true. It is true.
And the same is true in New York and in LA and in Sydney and in Melbourne, all these places that I've lived. People love talking about where they're from, but we don't.
I've noticed on and it might be on Twitter too, but I've noticed on Threads recently, ever since Governor Walz was selected, that it's Minnesota had a mini moment of just hey, I thought Minneapolis burnt down, and it was a picture of this gorgeous sunset over
Because,
the
because
lakes or whatever.
we're being given in real time the permission structure to be proud of where we're from.
Sure.
Because we just don't necessarily feel a little bit sheepish or embarrassed
Sure.
to talk about it. And
Yeah.
there's like an interesting historical precedent for this because in the era of like Midwest expansion, when you had like Cleveland and Milwaukee and St. Louis and St. Paul all vying for like Midwest superiority, like this is like end of the 19th century, start of the 20th century, the Gilded Age,
economically or culturally or whatever. Right?
Yeah, and there's this time when like it's uncertain where the new like capital of America is going to be. Which one of these Midwestern cities is best going to represent us? And so there's this arms race in the form of building cathedrals and city halls and big arches in St. Louis, for example.
Yeah.
And all these things that you can do to talk about your city's greatness.
Yeah.
I think that there's like we lost that. We lost our way for a while. But Tim Walz is an example of like we just need a little bit of like a moment to be like, oh man, yeah, look, the national media has descended on us and wants to talk about what Minnesota's all about.
All of those cities are great, but I've been to all of those cities, and I would tell you that I'm clearly biased. I live here, but I think Minneapolis is at the top of that, just in terms of the culture that it offers, the food scene, the theater scene, the music scene,
art museum,
the
whatever.
art, even the way the skyline looks. It's just a beautiful
And
city.
like Cathedral Hill, like our last episode, we did a big segment on Cathedral Hill and the history of it and the history of the cathedral and what was that street? Nina Street, yeah. And just little cool, unique stuff that you focus on with your 1 Minute Tours TikTok that really kind of, I think, adds to what you're talking about.
I don't think people know the history as well as they should. Whereas like you said in Philadelphia, you know the birthplace of the Constitution, Billy Penn, like you Betsy Ross, like you know these things. I don't feel like my kids learned this great local history in elementary school, like we learned the Civil War era history or like pre-American history.
Well, the version that we're taught is boring.
Yeah.
Like the Minnesota
For
thing
sure.
that the stereotype people hold up about Minnesota, I hate, which is like the Scandinavian, hot dish loving, lutefisk eating, a fish fry, Lutheran, that thing. Like that exists. I don't want to say it doesn't exist. And Fargo is a funny movie because it does talk about like a certain part of Minnesota, but there's so much more to talk about here. In recent times, like the Hmong community coming here and bringing in their culture,
Yi
contributing there.
Vang becoming a a local celebrity.
So going back before.
Sean Sherman and
then going to the other side of it, like our origin story isn't Scandinavian. The Scandies came like in the last half of the 19th century. Prior to that, we had the Germans and the Irish, and prior to that, we had the French, and prior to that, we had the Ojibwe and the Dakota, and like all these things don't follow the narrative. Like when you say Philadelphia, you think Liberty Bell, but when you say Minnesota, you think Scandinavians.
Yes.
And it's like Scandinavians aren't even the largest minority population of the places where the Minnesotans are descended from. The Scandinavians are not the largest. Like the German, there's more Germans than there are Scandinavians.
And I would have never. What's what I think of even living here is like Scandinavian.
Right, and so that's the thing. It's like the story that we think we're supposed to tell, the story that we grew up with about Minnesota. Isn't actually representative of where we are.
Yeah.
And so we need to challenge that. Like that's why I'm doing what I'm doing. Why Yi Vang, I think, has had success, and Sean Sherman, like you just mentioned.
Yeah.
Because they're challenging the idea of like, well, what is this Minnesota framing of a story? We always thought it was here, but actually the frame goes over here.
Yeah. I like what you just did on Austin, Minnesota, with it being the most diverse place in Minnesota.
There's Worthington is the most diverse, but it's because of Austin, Minnesota.
Okay, all right.
To be granular about it.
To be fair, I was in Vancouver watching on spotty Wi-Fi.
Yeah, just to like give to recap for the audience.
Yeah.
The long story short is that the most diverse place in Minnesota is on the border of Iowa in a small little town.
Okay.
It's a result of a big strike that happened at Hormel, which is based in Austin, Minnesota, the makers of Spam. They wanted to stop doing pay increases to the workers. Their workers went on strike, and the strike was not successful. Over a year of striking, Hormel held out and said, we're not going to pay them anymore. And eventually people went and found other lines of work. And so the meatpacking industry lost all of its talent. And so what did they do? They had to find a new set of talent, so they started finding migrant labor. so largely Mexican immigrants coming in.
Yeah.
That Mexican immigrant story kept getting told through the 90s and 2000s until 2006, when you have a huge number of people, many of whom are undocumented, who then have to work in this place in Worthington until the Bush administration has a big raid on Worthington, the largest immigration raid in U.S. history in 2006.
In Worthington?
In Worthington and 3 other places in the U.S.
Okay.
simultaneously. And so Worthington has to find other labor. To me, the obvious choice would be, hey, why don't we just pay our workers a fair amount? But they don't go down that path.
Yeah.
Instead, they say, let's just find legal immigrants. And so now you have, where are legal immigrants in this country? Well, they're Guatemalan immigrants, Sudanese, Burmese, and these are the people who make up Worthington, Minnesota nowadays.
Interesting.
That's so cool. And have we gotten to the point now where the Worthingtonians that have been there forever, is this something they're
You
embracing?
can say white people. It's fine.
Yeah, right.
It's okay.
Yeah, old stodgy white people.
No, it's not an easy story. The story is insane. They had I believe it was 7 different school board referendums, because you had this influx of people, and migrants to this country on average have more children than white Minnesotans.
Sure.
Right.
And so they come in with a greater need for education. Suddenly this little school in Worthington, Minnesota needs to have a huge ESL program, English Second Language program. And they don't have the funds for that. So they need to get more money. But who pays for the schools? The property owners. And who owns the property in Worthington? Farmers. And these white farmers who've been there for generations, doesn't really seem fair to them that this Johnny-come-lately is coming to town and now they got to foot the bill. It's so easy to tell the two-dimensional, boring version of this story of it's woke immigration embracing versus racist. But no, it's more complex and interesting than that.
This is an interesting, I think, segue into what you're doing now, the hidden middle. I mean, it's not interesting. I would say it's interesting, but it's necessary. I think that you're diving into these stories in a more meaningful way than probably 1 minute tours would allow you to do, which I would imagine is the point of the hidden middle.
Yeah, so I mean that's the idea. Is 1 minute tours has been fantastic because it gets my face out in front of people. And they all see it because it's so digestible, and so the algorithms have been kind to me. But there's only so much of a story you can tell in 1 minute. And one of my favorite things that I've learned is giving people context for a story they know part of is one of the best recipes for people sharing it and having content go viral, but you just don't have enough time to do it a lot of times. So the hidden middle, the idea of this is that we take 2 things that are seemingly disconnected from one another, and then we show you how these are actually linked. And so, when we think of Worthington, Minnesota, the fact that that's connected to spam and the Guatemalan crisis and the dictatorship in Myanmar. And all of that is demonstrated in this farm town. Those are things that you would not
interesting.
expect, right?
Super cool.
Side note about this, sorry to do this. My neighbor, Dave, shout out Dave, friend of the pod. His dad was the marketing guru behind spam.
Really?
His dad just passed away, but I remember him telling me about that because he's from Austin and he's a marketing guy, and his dad. So
there's that metaphor of the tip of the iceberg being only 10% of the iceberg, and most of it's underwater.
Yeah.
And what hidden middle is ultimately is saying it's not an iceberg, it's a multi-pronged thing where the little tips are coming out everywhere. So spam, for example, in and of itself interesting, right? Spam is meat from a can. What are we talking about? Right. But then you can get into the aspect of it of oh, well, it's a Minnesota company that grew from nothing. That's an interesting part. Or you can get into the part that
why is it popular in Hawaii or whatever?
Well, I'm just going to get to that. So it came around at a part in the early 1940s when the U.S. military is looking for a way to feed soldiers
Makes sense.
In a way that's shelf-stable. Spam comes along, and it's shelf-stable meat. Let's get this out to the soldiers. Where else is it useful? In places where it's hard to get meats out to remote islands like Hawaii.
There you go.
Gets to that embrace from the Hawaii. So now we have the U.S. military in World War II over here. We have Hawaiians over here. We can get into pineapple pizza if you want with the Hawaiian pizza.
I was going to say there's got to be pineapples involved in that.
You can get into the immigration side, the labor side of this, and so you see spam and it comes with it with a cultural weight to it. But there are so many different avenues you can go down underneath that hidden middle is ultimately a way to just have people appreciate there's so much more interesting context to the things that we see in the world, and we appreciate
So you have to be a history buff on some level, correct?
it.
No?
Maybe.
Maybe a different adjective, or
I'd
is
be
that
curious.
a noun? A
Okay,
buff.
okay.
Let's be curious. Because it's sometimes it's history, but sometimes it's not. Like something
Okay.
I've gotten really
a noun.
interested in recently is like how do the way that we tax people affect the way a city operates. So I don't know if you saw here in Minneapolis, they're struggling in downtown, right? They have the Wells Fargo building over there just sold for I think it was $85 million.
It was originally for sale for
Yeah,
like 300.
The
some,
commercial,
right?
so being realtors, I think we're both aware that the commercial retail space downtown in both cities is just
Yep.
taking a beating.
And so the thing that interests me to get to back to the point of like what makes me tick is like, all right, so that's the story in and of itself.
Sure.
But then a city is funded by taxes, and taxes come from property taxes of individuals, but also commercial property taxes. What does the city of Minneapolis do when this huge group
Maybe you're
of
the one
property
that
taxes?
broke this down. Did you make a video about this?
I haven't yet, but I'm
Okay.
working on it right now.
Okay.
And so like you said, you have to be a history buff. It's not a history buff. It's like what are the
It's understanding.
unwritten ways that our society is like built on.
Connected.
And so sometimes that's history.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's tax law.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's
Yeah.
political power. Sometimes it's like food preferences. It can be any one of
Yeah.
those things.
Yeah.
And that's what so Hidden Middle's not a history show, but it's a show of like there's a lot more to this than you think.
How much research do you wind up doing? So let's get to maybe the structure of the hidden middle,
Yeah.
right? So 1 minute tour, you're making these videos,
Yeah.
they come out whenever you want. Like hidden middle, I'm assuming is gonna, maybe I shouldn't assume, but an episode by episode
Yep.
basis.
Yep,
And
a long form.
How much work goes into it? How much research goes into creating one of these episodes?
I mean, I'd love to tell you that in a couple months' time.
Okay,
but
all right.
So right now we are in pre-production. So
Okay.
I don't have a good answer for that. Part of pre-production is that we're doing a crowdfunding campaign.
Sure.
Because this is a community-based thing, because 97% of my audience is from Minnesota, I wanted to be able to show people that like we have a real relationship with our audience. This
Yeah.
isn't just some guy with an ego who wants to be on camera. Like
Yeah.
I've been able to show that people are embracing Minnesota, and one way to show that is to make a major funding source of this show
Sure.
be my audience. So we're currently raising $60,000 on Kickstarter.
Okay.
The deadline for the campaign is January 17th.
How can they find? Let's talk directly.
Hiddenmiddle.com. So hiddenmiddle.com will send them to the Kickstarter, and they can back the project there. If we don't make our 60K, we get nothing. And so we wanted to put that in place because we wanted to prove this is fundable. But my point here was something good. What was it? You just led me to a question.
Research.
Oh yeah, about research. So we have ideas of what the show is going to be.
Okay.
And where we get our funding from is going to dictate kind of where those ideas go.
Gotcha.
So we're in pre-production for our pilot episode right now.
Okay.
The pilot is going to link nude John Lennon to the Mall of America.
Okay.
How are these two? What's the hidden middle
can't
between
wait.
these two things?
Okay.
And so
That's it. So first time I understood the name right there. What is the hidden middle between these
Right.
two seemingly unrelated topics?
Is it that? Is it the?
I like that.
Is it the album cover with him and Yoko Ono's bare asses?
You just blew,
like I'll give you a spoiler for it because it's not what is the link, it's how did I get to the link. It's going to be interesting.
Oh, okay.
So the spoiler of how these two things are linked
A
is
teaser,
that
not a spoiler.
it's that
Get people interested.
the Mall of America is a place. It was built on this big empty swath of land. And why is it big and empty? Because a big sports stadium used to be there called Metropolitan Stadium.
Yep.
Met Stadium's where the Vikings and the Twins played. Being a Scandinavian place, we had the locker room which had a sauna in it. And so it's one of the few saunas in professional sports at the time. The Beatles, during Beatlemania, they're touring all over and they come to the Twin Cities one time. They played Met Stadium, and in the press, they talked about using a sauna for the first time. They never had one before. It's kind of novel for these Brits living in the 60s, right?
Yeah, right.
And so what we want to do for the show is like we want to go get the original blueprint of Met Stadium and find the exact spot where the sauna was. And say, naked John Lennon was right here. in the
That's
mall.
so
You know,
cool.
it's-
at Journeys.
yeah, and so it's a gimmick, like the
No, it's
hidden middle
great.
part of it.
Yeah.
But what it allows us to speak about is how did the British invasion affect Minnesota? How does e-commerce and the move to shopping malls affect things? What does that look like today?
Sure.
What do we do with these dead malls like in Burnsville? So all these other ways that we'll sink our teeth into the topic are the thing that I'm really excited to talk about. But at the surface level, if I can get you to click the thumbnail because it has a naked John Lennon and the Mall of America, then that lets me get deeper.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. There was an interesting, someone wrote in it, I don't know if it was an article or a blurb, about the guy who designed the first mall in America, which I guess was at Southdale, Medina, where he saw it as the new hub to civic life, the new town square. And when he became aware, or when it was clear that commercialization and commercialism is what it became the center of and not civic life, that he like spent his whole life thereafter like being a staunch critic of malls. Which is crazy to me.
Exactly the thing where he's an Austrian, this guy.
Yeah.
And he kind of repudiates this thing that he does and then goes back to Europe, and the malls follow him over. The shopping malls come to Europe. So he's opened this Pandora's box over here, but it also leads to Skyways in downtown. The Skyways wouldn't be here if not for Southdale to compete with this existential threat from the suburbs.
That's interesting. I did not know that.
Anyway, there's a million different rabbit holes.
Great.
And one of the things we're struggling with on pre-production right now is just picking a lane.
Which one?
Yeah, because I can make the whole season just this topic.
Yeah, right.
But that density means I think we found a good subject. Now we can kind of get the best cream off the top for it.
Sure. We struggle with that. We struggle with having so much good cream
Yeah.
that we just can't make an episode less than an hour and 20 minutes long.
Right, right.
This one's going to be like 38 minutes,
Yeah.
bro. And then never.
That's
never.
when you do cut it down, though. So I did a podcast for my channel just as an experiment, and I talked to a guy for an hour. He's an author, Paul Russo, who wrote Friendly Fire, which is a great book. Talked to him about his book for an hour, cut it down to 24 minutes. And I cut a lot of stuff I didn't want to cut.
Yeah.
But like I really wanted it to be super dense in
Yes.
there. And it was, and it's done well. So
That's what people say, but we still have a very hard time doing it. And I notice on the TikTok stuff, when I do cut a story down, like I've cut Nicollet Island down. And again, this comes to me maybe not engaging or knowing that this is how it works. But all the comments are like, you're leaving out half the story. They did this, they did that. And I'm like, we are a podcast.
Yeah.
There is a whole podcast you can listen to.
Yeah.
We dive into all of that, you know?
also, though, don't listen to the comments.
No, I get that.
Something I learned earlier is
Yes.
like, don't pay attention to comments, pay attention to metrics.
Yeah.
So like, I will look at my view counts and my engagement counts before. When you look at individual comments, it can just be soul crushing, or it can also lead you astray of like, oh, well, audience wants this, but it's really 3 people in the comments.
The
who said
first
it.
podcast we ever made, we put out on the Coldwell Banker Facebook page, and just one of the oldest, crotchetiest, hasn't sold a property in 100 years, realtors was like, you two need to grow up and represent our brand better. You're like petulant children. Like we were just like,
and I called Casey and I was like, oh my God. We had just, anyway.
I was like, dude, you need to breathe. Like when you put yourself out there, like these things happen. And
being a content creator by definition is being professionally vulnerable.
Yeah.
That's what you're doing. You're putting yourself out there and you're saying, hey, everyone, tell me what you think of me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's not an easy
When did
thing.
you first start to see like, oh, this is a thing? Like with 1 minute tours, like
It was in Australia. And
it was in Australia.
It had
Okay.
kind of a two sides to it. So I started to go really viral over there, particularly on the subreddit in Melbourne, Australia. I had a streak there where I was posting videos on there every day, and people were upvoting it. I would be on the top of the subreddit. These like city-based subreddits, including our own here in the Twin Cities, like the city in Minnesota subreddit's the biggest. They're at 300,000 views. If I have something go hot on there and get to the top of the subreddit, that thing will get 500,000 views, that video. And so I saw this in Melbourne.
500,000. Wow.
Yeah. And so I saw this happen again and again and again in Melbourne. But eventually, Reddit is a place where people come back for comfort, and they expect to see things a certain way. And seeing my face again and again didn't rub everyone the right way. And so people started leaving comments about, I don't like this guy. Why is he on this thing? And you always have a percent of that. It's always going to be a non-zero amount of people who don't like what you do. That's just the nature of doing a creative pursuit.
Yeah.
But eventually, in this pressure cooker of COVID, when Melbourne was the most locked down city in the world outside of China, we were not allowed to go more than 5 kilometers from our house, only 1 hour a day, only with one person.
I remember
from our house.
that.
You must have an interesting perspective
yeah.
on the whole,
Yeah.
like, where's my freedom stuff in the United
New
States.
Zealand too, right?
Yep, But Melbourne had it worse than New Zealand because New Zealand was able to successfully lock down and come out of isolation.
That's true.
We kept hitting it in Victoria, the state that Melbourne lives in.
Yeah.
And so in this pressure cooker where no one is allowed to go more than 5 kilometers from their house, I had a business which allowed me to get a work permit to have a different set of rules apply to me. But the way that this personal brand works, it just looked like I was shirking COVID rules by being all over.
Yeah.
I was always masked. I would be masked in my videos. I was always outside. And so like I was very careful to make sure I was presenting the story correctly on there. But people the detractors started saying he's breaking COVID rules. I had someone call the health department and file a complaint saying that I was breaking COVID protocols. I got an inspection as a result of it. I started having people doxing me. I had someone like take all the domains around my business and then buy them all up and then like do like derogatory things on them. I really got
so ridiculous.
People got very intense about it. It was a little bit of an Icarus moment for me of
wax wings.
Well, and I needed to. What I did is I published too much on a platform that I didn't own. If someone comes to my TikTok page, they're here to see me, and that's the rules of it.
Yeah.
But in a place like Reddit, where it's like I am entering a town square, and I'm saying, would anyone like to listen to this? I have to be very cautious and considered and respectful of the fact that like I am entering a community that already exists, and I can't just use it for my personal gain.
Yeah, that's an interesting perspective. Yeah.
Where did you come up with the name for Hidden Middle?
Yeah, so the idea for Hidden Middle came without the idea, actually. It came from my co-producers. So my co-producers are Matt Osterman, who's the owner of Propellant Films. They're a major production company. They've made feature films with actors that you know, like
and they're
Dane
in this
Cook.
building.
They're in this building, yeah. That's it, coincidentally. That's where we met. I was going to a meeting, a pre-production meeting with those guys, and
I was on the phone with my wife.
Down.
I was like, I'm seeing this guy again. I just saw him riding a Segway yesterday. I'm going to ask him if he wants to be on the pod.
I was locking up my scooter, like, hey! And so, anyway, Matt approached me first and said, I think we should be doing more than just these short form videos. And then we tried to work together, couldn't quite figure out how it was going to work. Then he hired someone named Chris Parr. Chris Parr has already created a YouTube series that has gotten tens of millions of views. It's called Off the Cuff. This guy, Chris, gets hired by Matt. And Chris is like, have you heard of this 1 minute tours guy? We should do videos with him. And Matt's like, I've already met with him. So that was the lightning bolt that brought us together.
I see.
We figured out we wanted to work together. We figured out this is the perfect team to do this with like his knowledge of YouTube, my knowledge of social video and my audience, and then Matt's knowledge of like what it takes to get a production off the ground.
Sure. So it's a YouTube series. This will be airing on YouTube.
That was my next question, Casey. Like, what's the plan for...
I get it.
This is a part of pre-production and crowdfunding is we're going to see where it goes. So we're talking to Netflix and
maybe
Hulu
it's
PBS and all these places.
PBS, I was thinking like...
I would love for it to be YouTube just because it makes my relationship with the audience be direct. But then
you should bring back MTV, man.
But any of the broadcasters, the resources that they bring of saying, here's a check, go do what you want to do. Like that's pretty attractive.
Yeah.
And so we're having all those conversations right now.
The next Rick Steves.
Oh my God! There's no higher praise right there. Like, if I could, I've said before, I want to be the Rick Steves of the TikTok generation.
Yeah.
Because Rick Steves videos look the same way they did in the 90s.
Yeah.
And they're great. Like I use Rick Steves travel guides going through.
There's something comforting about watching his videos, though. You know, like.
But they are old school. They haven't gotten with the times of 2024.
Well, I also get
style.
Just talking with you, I get like Anthony Bourdain kind of vibes too.
Thank you.
I don't know if he was an influence on you, but like when you see like whatever one of his shows were, and you see like Thailand, and that's all you see, but you're gonna get so much more than that. You're gonna get whether it be military history of why Thailand is how it is and how it is, in the United States like that. The food, the culture, you're going to get everything. So I kind of, that's what I've been thinking about.
My Mount Rushmore of television presenters is Rick Steves, Anthony Bourdain, Louis Theroux, And then there's a guy, no one's going to know this reference. But
I don't even know who Louis Theroux is.
Oh my God, you got to
Yeah,
see
no,
him.
I've never
He's
heard of him.
incredible. He's a British documentarian. He's so comfortable being awkward. Like he'll ask, he did a series where called Weird Weekends on the BBC. And he would like talk about porn in the US. And he'd go on a porn
So like the
shoot.
anti-David Attenborough kind of?
Yeah, and so like he'd like ask people really uncomfortable questions about it.
Oh yeah, that's right
and
up
he'd
my
just
alley.
sit there. He went viral recently because
Philomena Kunk or something? Do you know?
he's like that, but serious.
I see.
And then the fourth one is a show in Australia called Restoration Australia, which is like a This Old House style like restoration show about great Australian architecture. And they had this guy who knows about Australian history, and he weaved it in with the architecture. The thing that I gravitate to is people who are passionate, and so it doesn't need to be something I'm interested in. Anthony Bourdain did it for food. The Restoration Australia guy did it for architecture history.
And I think the through line here is like authenticity, right? It's no pretense. It's interesting, topical, and digestible.
Do you study these people? Like, would you say it's like I study this style? Like, they're pieces that I knowingly think about taking from taking from my own style.
Was it the serious form of flattery?
Oh yeah, everything's stolen.
I mean, the thing is, I do some consulting for social video for businesses.
Sure.
And one of the mistakes that businesses make when they try to do TikTok videos is they just jump in and start creating. And it's kind of like the same thing I was talking about with Reddit, where you're going to someone else's house and then you're saying, here's what I want to do for dinner tonight. It's like, no, that's not how it works.
Yeah.
You need to hang out and just absorb for a while.
Yeah.
So for me, 2019 was consuming TikTok. And I wouldn't have jumped into the fray until I'd gotten comfortable with knowing what it was.
Yeah.
So yeah, those guys are influencers, and I do try to like mimic some things that they do. That I see something that they do that I like, I'll do it.
Yeah.
But it's not a matter of mimicry. It's I'm finding my own voice in the space between those things. So I actually have written down a document of like what makes a 1 minute tour, visually speaking. And so they're all unbroken takes.
Yeah.
They're all on location. They all start with some like interesting thing in the first 0.5 seconds.
Sure.
The first half second, I pop into frame in an unexpected way. I'm really far away and I run up to the camera. And then I have a transition in the first 10 seconds where maybe the camera is on a tripod and I grab it and I move it somewhere or I'm spinning around.
Yeah.
Because if you're not interested in what I'm saying or you don't want to look at my face, at least you'll recognize the background.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, what's that? I know that place.
Yeah.
And so I'm just looking for, they talk about a news hook, but for me, it's not like a hook, it's like Velcro. It's like I want 1,000 hooks in the first second so that you'll keep watching until the third second and until the 10th second because these algorithms are all based on, percentage of watch time.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the strategies I've had. It's that visual style, like I've taken from Anthony Bourdain and Louis Theroux and all these guys, but I've had to adapt it also for like what the dancing teenagers were doing on TikTok in 2018 when they came on.
Sure.
Like they figured out like
That's
doing
what-
something novel and different and a little bit attention grabby was like worth the cost of embarrassment to do.
That's what we're trying to figure out a little bit with the TikTok is that, I couldn't tell you. I think I got something that's gonna get some views, and it's got like 1,000. Then I'm just like, all right, this next one is similar to the last one, and all of a sudden it's 150,000.
Yep. When people go on these things and they have an ulterior motive, the algorithms figure it out and the viewers figure it out.
Yeah.
So if you're a realtor,
It's the authenticity thing, man.
We don't even talk about real estate on hire us.
But
It's
how
just
many
like,
times do you see a realtor on social video who is just like, look at this great new house? Like,
want to buy it?
Yeah.
I mean, the answer is you don't really see it because the algorithm doesn't serve that stuff
Yeah,
up.
that's true.
But like there's realtors that I'll follow. I'm not interested in buying a house. I don't even like houses. I kind of hate the whole idea of ownership.
Yeah.
I'm not really the right guest for your podcast.
Yeah. Right.
But that's a lot of people feel that way.
But the realtors I'll follow are like the day in the life. Like it's just a slice of life, and they are really fired up about this aspect to what they do. And I'm attracted to that regardless of what the actual thing they do is.
Exactly.
The biggest thing for me, even as in prior life as a musician and as a studio owner, and now as a realtor, is and I don't know if this is the wrong take, but Gary Vee is the guy that comes up to me, right? Like whatever he was, he's not that anymore.
Yeah.
He's a marketing guy now, right? So as a musician, I wanted to be a musician. Not a guy marketing my music who became a marketing guy telling other people how to market. I wanted to make music. And I feel like it was a choice. And I feel like because you have to spend a good amount of time on social media nowadays to market your presence in whatever it is. And I feel like that takes away from real estate or music or something else like that. So I've always kind of made that conscious decision to be like, I'm just gonna post a picture of me in the studio or whatever and not be a marketing guy.
What is it about real estate that it seems to be the trajectory for many successful people? So like what Sven Svengard is doing real estate now.
Yeah, he's been
Yeah.
he's had his license for a while now. Yeah.
So
yeah, and like I a lot of other examples of people I know who have like they've taken all sorts of different paths, but they end in real estate at the end. And why is this seem to be the answer for a lot of people?
I can speak to my experience. I'll let Andrew speak to his. For me, I love the process of like, this is in a broader scope, like shopping. I don't know if that's like commercialism, right? But like, you got some old golf clubs and you want to sell them. I'm the friend you hit up and be like, hey, can you throw these on your Facebook Marketplace?
Yeah.
Because I like that, like, I'm gonna sell your item and get you the best price. I'm gonna go research a car for my mother-in-law and make sure she gets the best car for her that's the right price and not taken advantage of. And I love architecture. So when those two came together in like housing, I've always really enjoyed the process of like looking for houses, buying houses, helping other people buy houses, like looking at the workmanship and the craftsmanship behind the houses, the neighborhoods, where to be, like every aspect of it. And my wife was like, why don't you get your license? Even if you just do it like as a side hustle because you have the studio. And I was like, why have I never done this before?
I want to push maybe a challenge on you guys about this. The signals that I get from real estate are the same signals I get from people I know who are in MLMs. And multi-level marketing.
Oh, interesting.
In that there's a low barrier to entry, low-ish. I know there's like a course and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But you're not going to be a surgeon.
Yes.
No.
No.
And so there's a low barrier to entry. So there seems to be a large market of people who have their license who are able to do it. And so my feeling is that probably there's many more people who are doing it than people who are successful at it. And what is really happening is like
Fully true.
5% of the people who have their license are really successful. 20% are and then most of the people are not able to make ends meet.
Here's my completely unfiltered answer to that. My wife tried to own she owned a credit repair company because a friend of hers was involved in that. And we got to meet a lot of realtors and loan officers at the time. And it was a learning experience, and she would never do that again, and she can't stand it, and she's in healthcare now, and it's great. But through that experience, I learned that, and this show is not for realtors, I learned, in my opinion, that over 60% of realtors are total D-bags. They should have no business helping people with the largest transaction of their life. They're like, I'll edit this out if it's too whatever. Like they're who want to get up at 10 a.m. and do the least amount of work and think they can make money, and they like to just go drink a lot at happy hour, and like I wouldn't buy like a pair of shoes, let alone a house, from half the people that I met.
Yeah.
And so when I think
It's
about
opportunistic, mechanical, not personal.
But I'd say the same thing about the recording industry. Studio, and you know how many studios in this city were like, oh, I'm trying to get my stuff.
Yeah.
And you've been trying to get your stuff for 2 years. Like, who are you working with? Why doesn't he have a hard drive? Why doesn't she have a hard drive? Why can't you get you own this, right? Like, send an email. I'm replying within 2 hours. Like, this is your stuff. So I feel like if you come to the conclusion, or at least I came to the conclusion that like, I can communicate, well educated, I'm super hardworking, I'm not gonna drop the ball, and I genuinely care about like the outcome for you, not the outcome for me, because it's the relationship that matters, right? It's like the building of a relationship that matters, not this singular transaction. Like if those truly are your motives, as they are for me, like the fact that I enjoy the housing industry and construction and renovation and all this other stuff was like a no-brainer for me, because I have so many friends that feel so negatively about realtors that even when I speak to them, it takes them, 30 minutes into the conversation to forget that I'm like their friend and they like me and not just some a-hole realtor.
Well, it's also like part of it is maybe, and maybe it's the MLM thing as well. It's like part of the job, maybe virtue signaling, like or signaling success. Really.
Sure. Yeah.
In the same way that, like, you want to, if you're making a TV show, you don't say, "Hey, we really hope we're going to make this money to make the TV show." We're making the TV show and it's really successful. Look at all these things. Like, that's been an element of, like, we've had to play that confidence game for the Kickstarter campaign because people don't want to give money to something where you're like, I don't think it's going to happen.
Sure.
It's happening. Like, we didn't. It's not just posturing. Also, we're like booked in filming times.
Yeah.
Because it's going to happen.
Yeah.
But there's, like, with the real estate side of things, it just feels a little bit like there's so many people saying, like, this is an amazing thing that I can make so much money out of, and I'm just like, I don't believe it.
I don't think
Most people don't.
And
Most realtors do way more than half.
think
Only do 1 or 2 transactions a year.
Yeah.
And I think the stat is something like 25% of all realtors give up their license in the first year.
Yeah, really.
Because I think people get into it and they think, like, oh, I'm just going to go sell some houses, and they don't realize that it takes work to find clients. Right. And then once you find a client, like, you have to be personable. You have to, like, make a connection to have them want to work with you versus the 8 million other realtors that are around.
Right.
So yeah, I can see where the MLM thing comes from for sure. Because I think most people join that thinking that they're gonna be at the top of the pyramid.
Well, it's not a success. You brought up Gary Vee as well. Like, I think a lot of Gary Vee, like, he's very good in his videos, very motivational in his videos, but he's also selling success. Telling this can be you, and he's like preaching practices that I think very few people actually follow. And it's like people have started calling it the hustle mindset or hustle culture now,
but
as a critical thing.
Don't you think that's the difference sometimes between people who want to just do the job and people who want to talk about how they're doing the job?
I just think there's a lot more people in the world who aren't going to get up and start their own business and are going to build a studio like this or whatever. I think, like, there's a split of what, like, the majority of people want security. They want to be able to provide for their family and don't have to worry about, like, is this paycheck going to come in the next month? And that's actually a much more rational decision than what we're doing here.
Yes.
We're being a little bit insane.
Yeah. I haven't had a real job since college.
Right.
And it's 20-some years.
And so what you want to do is you want to virtue signal to yourself, like, no, I'm being noble, I'm being different and all that. When really there's an element of, like, we could be self-critical and be like, oh, we're just being selfish dicks to the people in our lives by not just going to work the corporate job that's going to provide the stability that, like, makes everyone stress a lot less.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Well said, for sure. And, like, I was just lucky enough when I got into it many years ago. I was in restaurants. I was a bar manager and a wine buyer for a local restaurant group for years and years and years and years.
He was my manager.
I was his manager. That's how we first met.
Which restaurant group?
Parasole.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Yeah. Yep. So I got my start waiting tables at Chino Latino 20-some years ago. Yeah.
Remember when Uptown was cool?
Yeah, right? Yeah. It's coming back, baby.
We were trying to decide whether Uptown is less cool or we're just old.
No, it's less cool.
No,
okay.
it's...
Okay.
I did a video on this. I did a video where
No Filio, no Chino Latino.
Yeah.
We had that whole corner.
We should all be pissed off at Apple and
the Uptown
at Victoria's Secret and all these places that came in because
that southwest corner of that intersection.
I'm so mad about it because Uptown was such a good spot.
Yeah.
What always happens is a wheel of gentrification.
Yeah.
It's like the cool bohemian area becomes cool enough that you have these neat underground bars and restaurants and stuff.
Yep.
People go over there and they start enjoying them. And then corporate America hears about it.
Yep.
And Apple Corporation says, we could sell a lot of iPhones here.
Yep. Urban Outfitters.
Then we as a city say, oh my God, Apple's looking at Uptown. That's exciting. And they go, and then the moment the going gets tough, say there's a riot and an unprecedented global pandemic, they're gone.
Yep.
And so what they've done
who's
is
left to deal with it?
They've ripped out the Uptown Diner and they've ripped out the Chino Latino wasn't able to succeed over there because we wanted to favor these big brands. And it's just like, it was a quick hit. We felt good because these big corporations thought we were special and the big corporations felt they were in a cool neighborhood. But it was like building everything on just sand. And it eroded away as opposed to like having businesses and like Parasol Group, like a very like respected local organization having that big piece of real estate. They go away. And now, like, no one's occupying that space, you know?
It's like McDonald's and Penzies are like the only two remnants.
Like, the Uptown Theater opened. They redid that cinema. A really cool nightclub. I was at the opening for it.
Were you? Cool.
I was really excited about it. I was like, okay, now this is the moment. It's coming back.
Yeah.
And it's going to be a process because it is is
Takes
a
a decade
long
at
slog of
least.
generations of work of
Yes.
businesses getting there.
Yeah.
And then if the neighborhood and the city don't work to prevent the big corporations from like taking all this stuff out,
Yep.
it just like I'm really mad about it.
Yeah.
I think we should all be mad about it.
Yeah.
And we
Yeah.
should take the lesson of it for the future.
I think that's that trickles down even into the real estate aspect of it. Is that I think something like only 3% of homes in Minneapolis and St. Paul are owned by corporations.
Really.
Whereas like Philadelphia area is somewhere in the order
Way
of
higher.
30%.
Yeah.
Really.
And I think a lot of cities are getting, like America is getting bought out by venture capitalists. From the housing to the stores to the retail, and all the
Yep.
retail, even if they're 3 different brands, they're all owned by the 5 same
Yep.
companies. And so hopefully Minneapolis and St. Paul continue to do a good job of limiting
Yeah,
that.
local ownership matters on these things.
Yeah.
And it's one of the reasons
the
why.
skeptical side of me says, I hope you're right when you say I hope we can do something so that what happened to Uptown in 2008 or 7 or 6 or
Yeah.
whatever doesn't happen again. But
Right.
the skeptical side of me is like, the money's gonna talk.
Yeah.
I mean, it's going to talk if we don't take an active.
That's what- right.
An active role
Right.
in building the
I
community
agree.
that we want to see.
I agree, and I hope we do.
That's one
I
of the
hope
reasons
we
why
do.
we're seeing, I think, some success on our Hidden Middle Kickstarter campaign right
Yeah.
now. Is that the message that we're saying is like we need our own stories to be
Sure.
told.
Sure.
The people who are telling the stories of Minnesota right now are in New York and in LA,
Yep.
and they don't know what's going on over here. And
Well
it's-
put.
Hidden Middle is not necessarily going to be a show only about Minnesota. It's going to be about any hidden topics. And so you might find me on an episode in the Czech Republic or in Argentina or wherever, but it will always be produced out of Minnesota. That doesn't necessarily make sense for if you're just making a TV show, you'd make it in LA usually.
Sure.
But like this is how we nurture our community. We can't just be raised in a place and then go as soon as we're ready to contribute any value to it.
Yeah.
Like this is the thing that I feel strongly about is like I'm, next year I'll be 40 years old and I was, my first 24 years were spent here. It's time for me to give back to the
Yeah.
community. This can't just be a place where
Yeah.
we leave for our most productive years and then come back after.
You're fighting the good fight, man, because it's been that way in music. It's been that way in a lot of different things. It's like in order to be successful, you have to leave. And we're a major market, man. This metro area has 3 million plus people. Like this is a big enough market to support
Top
the
20.
kind of
Top
ventures.
20 biggest metro areas.
Yeah.
Maybe even close to top 15 in the
And
United States.
it's a metro area that thrives culture, I feel like.
And places like Nashville is of a comparable size.
Yep.
But think of like the cachet in your head
Yes.
that Nashville takes
Yeah.
up,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
We are that. We could be that.
Totally
But we
right.
need to start speaking about it. And another good example of this are who are our 2 great sons of music here. We have Prince, we have Bob Dylan.
Yeah.
Bob Dylan's in the news right now because the new
Timothée
movie,
Chalamet
Timothée
movie,
Chalamet
yeah.
movie's just come out.
Yeah.
But that movie starts with him arriving to New York. It doesn't tell his Minnesota story
Yeah.
in there. And he never really embraced Minnesota the way that Prince did.
Yeah.
Like he owned the Orpheum for a while, and that's great. But like he has not really looked back at Minnesota in the same way
Sure.
that Prince had Paisley and
Sure.
was doing the parties there.
He lived here.
Yeah, he was a
whole life.
Minnesotan.
Yeah.
And think of the longevity that like people think so glowingly of Prince now, but also think about like the other musicians and artists and venues that came out of that. We have
Totally
First
right.
Avenue
Oh, yeah.
because of Prince.
Oh, yeah.
We have Morris Day and the Time and all these
Yeah.
other. We had Bruno Mars
Yeah.
and Uptown Funk.
Yeah. And even
paying
like you were
homage
saying,
to it.
Flight Time Studios preceded Prince, but him coming out of that and shining a light on that, and then Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis and the whole ecosystem.
So we owe a debt of gratitude to Prince, I think, for what he did
Sure.
by staying in Minnesota.
Yeah. I think
but
Atmosphere and Rhyme Sayers did a lot of that for the hip hop
huge, right?
community here,
Right? I mean, I remember going to see Dessa from.
Yeah, we
I
both
cut her
know Dessa.
I cut her
Yeah.
first record in the kitchen/studio of my apartment on Snelling Avenue.
Did you really?
She
Yeah.
used to host trivia right down from Seven
With
Corners
Sean.
where I lived, and I went down. I would like
Yeah.
do trivia with them.
We waited. Dessa and I waited tables together at Chino Latino.
How cool is this?
Yeah.
We were in like the Twin Cities,
Yeah.
and it's this big bustling city where
Yeah.
we all know each other,
Yeah.
all these cross connections,
Yeah.
and so like it is easy to take from the place that raised you, but it's not as easy or natural to give.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the message that I'm doing with Hidden Middle.
Yeah.
It's like we want to tell people like we want to have our own stories, or we want this to be a community-backed project
Yeah.
in the same way that Prince did it for us, and
Yeah.
we hope other creators here will do in
Yeah.
the future.
Well, we really appreciate you coming on today.
Yeah.
And sharing your story.
It was fun.
And sharing, what you're going to be up to in the future. And I will, or we'll make sure that we get the hiddenmiddle.com.
That's right.
Is it thehiddenmiddle.com or just
Nope, just hiddenmiddle.com.
Hiddenmiddle.com.
It sounds like such just a cool initial germination of an idea that's turning into something, and
Yeah.
it sounds it's really cool.
And if people give $25, then they get a ticket to the premiere. We're going to do an in-person premiere here in the Twin Cities. And so it's going to be a whole red carpet thing.
Yeah.
And then
Done.
as it goes up from there, like if you give $250, you're on our advisory board and we have like monthly meetings with you where you're
Okay.
part of the production. If it's $1,000, you're sitting in an edit session with us. And so
Okay.
we have all these rewards going up to $10,000, but going as low as $5 as well.
Sure.
Because we just want people to be able to be a part of this, regardless of whether they can afford a cup of coffee or something more.
Yeah.
Well, go to hiddenmiddle.com. Give what you can if you want to see something, cool and unique and authentic and local happen. Whatever you can give, 5 to 1,000 or more.
Yeah.
Thank
Be
you.
part of helping to build, I guess, the Minnesota production scene, creator scene. So thank you so much for joining us today, man.
Thanks,
guys.
John.
Coming on. Thanks.
This must be the place. Yeah, this must be the place. Ain't no time